Hey guys, what's going on? David Avalon here with my co-host Robert Drysdale for another episode of Breaking the Guard. Rob's been, I think it's one of the longer delays of hiatuses that we've had.
Yeah, man, this has been like, what, almost a month, maybe? A month? It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a month. Yeah, just busy. Dave's traveling a lot. I've been traveling a lot. Work schedule, but all good stuff. I just got back from Maui.
Yeah,
Short little vacation with my kids.
Living the life.
Talk about a life, man. Every time I go to Hawaii, like anywhere in Hawaii, I just feel like, man, it does not get better than this. I've been to many places, man. Like I've been all over Brazil, Caribbean, Australia, Thailand, Mediterranean. I think Hawaii is my favorite. I think Hawaii is just like the one place I feel like, man, this is just absolutely magic. And just everywhere you go, there's something beautiful to look at. You know, it's like, oh, there's that good beach over there. There's no such thing in Hawaii. Like
Yeah,
it's 360, like beautiful mountains and and water everywhere. It's just incredible. But yeah, my kids had a blast. It makes you think what kind of life you want to live. You know,
Sure.
whenever I'm in a place like that, I always remember. I don't think I told this story recently. I can't remember where it was. The fisherman and the businessman. Ever tell you that story?
Yes, we did it.
Yeah, and it always makes me remind me of that story. It's like, what's the point of it all? Like, why are you working? So, what is it about accumulating wealth that is going to make you so much happier at the end on the other side, right?
Yeah.
Like, it makes you think these things. And like, meanwhile, this guy lives in a tent on the water in Hawaii and fishes for a living. Like, who's smart, right? Like, it makes you rethink priorities in life.
I guess it brings about the question, like, what is the purpose of life then, right?
Yeah,
because you could easily, well, not easily, but you can definitely live that lifestyle where it's just about sustenance, right? You don't need to accumulate anything. You just need to be able to live day to day, and ideally with some comfort, right? But you can live within your means and just enjoy yourself, versus being what we consider highly productive and successful, where you're conquering industry and you're producing things, you're getting your name out there. And I guess you can make the argument you're contributing more to society by your efforts. So I guess it depends where you want to be. But I think I think it's like in phases, right? At a certain point, everybody wants to make their mark, contribute, become somewhat famous, at least have some type of impact in the world where you leave and like people know that I provided something.
It wasn't in vain. My life wasn't in vain.
I wasn't just an air mouth breather taking space, right? Like I did something that helped, my community, whatever. But then at a certain point, it's like, all right, now it's time just to enjoy what little time I have left.
It's called retirement. That's I think that's like the natural progression of things. It's like, I've done my work, now I'm gonna enjoy life and rest a little, because you don't have the energy to do much else anyway. I imagine you get to 70, it's harder and harder to have the energy to want to go out and conquer. You probably, I know people, my grandfather worked till he was like 80. Like, he just never stopped. Started when he was 8 years old. He worked until he died at 83. He had cancer, and that's why he stopped. Otherwise, he would have kept going, But like, it's different for everyone. No, but I'm with you, man. I think that it's like the meaning of things is the real, like, what does it mean to you, right? I think a lot of people that stay on that treadmill, for you to stay that motivated for that long, I don't think it's money that motivates you. It's the actual accomplishment, right? Because I think a lot of these like superficial rewards, they're short-lived. There's only so much, like so many medals you can win before you kind of run it. Like, it's got to be, for you to stay in jiu-jitsu your whole life, it can't be the medal. It can't be the reputation. It's got to be something else, right? Because it's short-lived. Same thing with, like, I think, chasing money. It's going to be short-lived. You're going to run out of breath eventually, because it's not enough motivation to stay on the treadmill. You got to really love what you're dodoing. Stay long-term,
I think on the most part, that's true. Although you do have the Jeff Bezos of the world that will keep pushing. But I agree with your point. Like, law averages, like the majority of people are going to get tired of that at a certain point.
But I think Jeff Bezos loves what he does. He just happens to make a lot of money. I think if you made a quarter or a tenth of the money, which is like not even in his case, like you have to get 100th of, and I think he'd be doing it, even if he made as much as me and you, I suspect he would be doing the same thing. I think he just loves. Well, I think, guy, for you to be that successful building something, you have to love to build. I think it's not that he doesn't. I think that the prime, what keeps him at bed awake at night is not so much, how I have so much money in my bank account. I don't think that's what he's thinking about. I'm thinking about, what is my next move? Like, what's the next move? What's the next building block, right? You see a lot of people that are motivated solely by the money. Those are the ones that run out of breath, I think. I think they're the ones that are truly passionate about building. Those are the ones most successful ones. And if they happen to make a lot of money, because you can be building your jiu-jitsu career and not make anything it's like us, or you can you can be building something like Amazon at a time where no one thought it was going to be anything, and it turned out to be the biggest company in history, biggest corporation in history. They're bigger than governments.
Yeah, I think in his case, and for a lot of people, that stature, it's just a drive for power, right?
Yeah.
I think it's not necessary. I mean, money is just one measure of power.
Yeah.
But controlling the whole industry, for example, is
you got to get a kick out of it, for sure.
And, like he just had his space flight.
Yeah.
So that's obviously like, well, I guess I read somewhere that apparently his brother wanted to go to space, like I guess when they were kids, something like that. So if that was the case, man, that's a pretty amazing thing.
Is he competing with his brother still? Is it still like?
No. He took his brother with him.
Oh, he took his brother with him.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. So it wasn't an evil type of thing.
He's like, fuck you, little brother. I'm going to space. Yeah. You stay here on boring Earth.
No, he took him up. So he did. Like, I guess they were trying to check off boxes because I guess he brought what would have been the youngest astronaut and the oldest astronaut, him and his brother. But then the FAA decided, you know what? That doesn't meet the criteria for being an astronaut anymore.
What does it mean?
Because apparently you have to reach a certain height. I think they call it the Cardin, or I probably have it wrong, but something to that level that a certain height above the Earth's atmosphere, you're in space. And they more than surpassed it. But then they said, you know what? The criteria has to be that you have to be doing something useful or productive to the scientific community. You can't just be like a passenger. And this shuttle was autonomous.
Yeah.
They weren't doing anything. They were just sitting there going up and going down. And I guess the argument is
like the giant metallic penis is going up.
The phallic.
What was that? It was like, why would you choose that shape? I'm like, why not a normal shaped rocket? What's wrong with that?
That's what they made the Dr. Evil comparison. He's bald and stuff like that.
Oh man, that's so
bad. So I guess the argument is it's kind of like if you flew in an airplane just as a passenger, now you're a pilot.
Yeah.
Like, no, you're just a passenger. Yeah. I guess they're trying to say, you're not an astronaut because someone shot you into space. You're an astronaut when you actually work in space.
Okay.
Seems a little petty, but I guess now they're seeing that this is possibly a trend going on. Like they're going to start doing space tourism.
It's going to get cheaper.
Yeah, then you're going to, everybody's now an astronaut because they got into space. So I get it. It just seems like the timing could have been better, It's
a good point. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because technically, if you're just like sitting there, you're not really, you're just a passenger. You're really just a tourist, But I think Elon Musk was talking about like shuttles that go across the world through space, and you can make it to China in an hour. So it wouldn't be like a 16-hour flight anymore. It would be like a 1-hour flight through outer space. So you would go out of the Earth's orbit and then go to China or Brazil or Australia, whatever, and you'd be there in an hour or less.
That's wild.
It's pretty amazing. Like I'm 100% in favor of that because like no one wants to waste a day. That's how spoiled we are. Like back in the day, people had to get on a ship and cross the Atlantic, and they were excited about it. Like 3 months in the ocean, Like we're like, oh man, this is like 8-hour flight that's gonna take me all the way to Europe, and they're we're complaining. But yeah, it's gotten more comfortable for sure.
No, absolutely. So I mean, in regards to like that conversation, we're just talking about power accumulation. Yeah. So I think for sure that's something that motivates people who are that industrious, because at a certain point the money doesn't mean anything anymore, right?
Well, no, you couldn't spend it if you tried.
Yeah, like it's gonna last an eternity.
It's not about comfort anymore. It's about I truly believe they just love to build, and they're competitive, of course. They're watching who the guys behind them, immediately behind or immediately in front of them, right? So they're in competition the whole time, and I think that's part of the motivation. But I think you have to. It's like jiu-jitsu. I see this all the time. You get these, and back in the day when we started, there were a lot less practitioners. Let's be frank.
Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, you knew because there was no money and there was no. I mean, for you to get a picture of Gracie magazine, like you had to win a world. I mean, and that's a small picture. Maybe there's no recognition either. You were doing it for the only reason you were doing it is because you absolutely loved it. Right. Today, because there's money being flooded into the sport, you get more popular. What happens is it draws a lot of people. I don't think they have the right motivations. And even though they're super into jiu-jitsu for a while, it lasts like 3-4 years. And once they see they're not going to get what they were expecting out of it, you can see them losing motivation. They don't have the motivation to stick to it for 20 years because I don't think they're really passionate about it. It's not jiu-jitsu that they love. It's what they think they can get out of jiu-jitsu that they're really all about.
Right.
And then people like that, when I watch him all the time, and I'm like, this guy is so, and he's not into jiu-jitsu, he's into what he think he's going to get out. They run out of breath. Give it 3-4 years, and you can see their motivation start going down because they're not doing it for the right reasons, right?
No, and that's true because when I started, I paid to compete.
Yeah.
Right, and not just like NAG or something like that. Just like in any we're gonna do a shoot fight. They go, it's $50 to get in to fight. And okay, that's what it is. So. And it I never had this idea that I was going to be rich and famous through.
It never crossed your mind because it wasn't even in the horizon. Yeah. There was talk about MMA outdoing boxing one day. That was the only thing we kind of believed in those days. Like, anything other than that, it was just like, no, there's no way this is going to happen.
But even that quickly dissipated because, early 90s, UFC had a lot of attention, right? But then once they went into the dark ages, like early 2000s, like nobody had heard of it anymore. Yeah. So you would be a fool to go into MMA thinking I'm going to become
absolutely famous. Yeah.
No, it's like you're just a tough guy and you want to prove yourself.
Yes.
And that's what it is. So like you said, in my gym when people first came in, they were all lunatics.
Yeah. Yeah, they're the crazy ones. Yeah. But they were there for the right reasons.
Yeah, because they wanted to train, they knew what it entailed, and they enjoyed the art of it.
Yeah, they enjoyed being, and you're exactly right. There was no expectation. When people think, they're there for them, you got to understand, newer generation can say that. Yeah. You can look at how much money Conor McGregor's making, you can go that's what I want. Okay, that's your motivation. But back in the day when Mark Coleman and Mark Kerr and Randy was fighting, those guys were fighting in that era right there, right? There was nothing there.
Yeah,
there was nothing. And Pride came about, and it was like because Pride was paying so much more than the UFC was, like in the day. Yeah. But it was a small window too. It wasn't a big one, and I feel like the same guys were taking advantage of it. There were always half a dozen people that actually were consistently making big money from Pride. Most people were still on the fringes of the art. Yeah.
Yeah, and right now, MMA does present an opportunity for a major athlete. Because there's still relatively not a lot of competition when you compare it to NBA, NHL, all that. You don't have to go through a college program and excel in college and then go into the, I forgot what they call it, intermediate between pro and college. I forget what it is. But there's a lot of tiers you have to get through before you get to the top. In MMA, you can just fight pro right from the get-go and get on one of these shows, and now you're in the big time.
I think the ladder is definitely shorter. I will say this though, man. I grew up in Brazil. I've seen there's a professional team in my hometown, and I've seen them practice. Their practice isn't that hard. They got good cardio. Soccer is they got to make it. I've seen I used to do conditioning gym here in Vegas, and the UNLV football team would come over to do conditioning with us. And I'm not trying to shit on soccer and football here. I'm just being honest. I'm watching their physical conditioning, their training, and I'm not impressed. It is easier. When it comes to physical condition for fighting, and other sports. I think gymnastics is brutal. I think there's some sport, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's the hardest, even though I think fighting physically is probably top 5, one of the hardest things you can do physically, right? Because it's so demanding. But a lot of even though I could seriously say the ladder is longer, it might be harder to go because you have to start, you start high school, middle school, that's when your career, when you start building. In MMA, you get the phenoms, guys that just rise to the top very quickly, 2-3 years fighting. Next thing you know, they're winning, making millions in the UFC.
Yeah.
Rare, but it does happen. But the training is so much harder.
It's definitely a lot more strenuous. But if you have that, if you're athletic and you have the ambition, there is an opportunity. Because right now, I think Conor McGregor is the number 1 paid athlete
in the world.
Of all sports, which is, phenomenal.
But that's not just from sports. That's from a lot of endorsements.
Yes. Well, he had that. Yeah, the whiskey thing that made over $100 million, something like that.
That's
when
crazy.
He sold it. So that was the bulk of it, but still he would have never had that platform without the MMA career because the UFC provides such a megaphone for marketing.
Yeah.
If you know how to use it, like someone like Conor did, you can blow up. And there's certain guys there who are doing really well with that. And even like this kid Sean O'Malley. The Sugarfoot, whatever, he's broken a bunch of times. I don't know, the appeal is not there for me. But he's making money, he's got his own.
I don't know what. Yeah, I think it has something to do with Snoop Dogg. I can't even keep up. It said something about him and blew him up.
if you understand the opportunity and know how to use it,
Yeah.
you can blow yourself up much faster, right? So in that sense, it is going to attract a lot more athletes versus what I call like warriors, right? Like when MMA started, everybody was a warrior that got into it because there was no other incentive, right? You're not playing a game. You're there to fight because you want to prove yourself. But when you're there for money or fame, now you might not be what I consider a warrior, someone who's willing to die for fighting. Like you're just there to cash in and then pop out.
It's different motivation, man.
So it is a different motivation. And I think even like in jiu-jitsu, like you're saying, that can start creeping in now because there's more money in jiu-jitsu than there ever has been. And there's also more exposure than there ever has been. I mean, you can have someone like, and just, I guess, the nature of the world now with podcasts and all that. Hey, Joe Rogan says your name a couple of times.
Yeah, it says Kingmaker.
Yeah, like this guy, and I blow him. I tell people all the time, it doesn't work. The knees over toes guy. Have you heard that guy?
You were telling me about the
it's for like
the squatting, right?
All that. I heard about it from Joe Rogan, and that guy's everywhere now. Good for him. It's a good product for sure.
Yeah.
So like if you have a good message and you can get on the right channel, everybody can tune in. So now like jiu-jitsu is kind of like that, and he's blowing people up all the time. Craig Jones, Gordon Ryan, a lot of these kids are, and it's great. It's good for the movement. But as you said, it could, I guess we could say, corrupt like your motivations for training.
And here's the thing: if you're not going to make it to an elite level without the right motivations, you can have all these things coexisting with the right motivation. So you get like someone like Connor, who is an exceptional athlete. He's a good fighter, but I wouldn't rank him the top 10 of all time. Like most people would, but he has the right motivation. He loves fighting, and he was the most successful, financially speaking, fighter of all time in MMA, at least, right? So these things coexist. But like I remember, I think it was Quentin Jackson was telling me one thing. I think he made like $200 his first fight. I remember it's like $300 or something like that. I remember like talking to João Alberto Barreto, who we interviewed for the documentary, and he was telling us, this isn't off. It's not in the book, but like just conversation off. He's like, we used to fight every weekend, and he got cut. You stitch up. You know what you do? You go back. You had stitches, and you go back fighting bare knuckles. Used to fight every weekend, and that was just like to break even, pay the bills. Like it was just like that was the lifestyle. You want to be a fighter, you fight every weekend. So you have like maybe 2 days training, whatever, days off, resting, and then you fight again on Saturday.
It's brutal.
Like, you get you're injured and you fight. There's no such thing as, I hurt my knee, I can't fight. There's no such thing. You just go. And they're like, man, that's hardcore. But those were the early days, right? That's how it was. And there's been a progression. But just think about what your motivation would have to be to be in the middle of nowhere in Brazil, fighting like that to make nothing.
Yeah.
Like you have to absolutely love fighting. Like that guy, you cannot question his motivation because there's nothing there. There's not. I mean, some press. There's some press, but it's not a lot. Like no one's gonna get rich from it. Back in the day, 1930s, 40s, 50s. You kidding me?
Yeah.
Like people weren't even thinking about this, but these guys were in like smaller arenas, banging it out, headbutts, elbows, knuckles. Dude, that's brutal shit.
Yeah, bare knuckle is tough.
It's tough on the hands too. That's
what I mean. Yeah, you break your hands.
Because everyone people that don't, Bliss City may not know this, but the gloves, they protect, they prevent cuts on the face because it's gonna do that. It's gonna like with enough Vaseline, it's gonna a little bit, right? Not a lot, but a little bit. But you're gonna get cut less. But really, what it does is protects the hands because one of the worst things that can happen, even with gloves, you hurt yourself. You punch someone in the forehead. Like, if you jab someone or right-hand someone on the crown of their forehead, you're far more likely, you might rock the guy a little bit with the impact, but it hurts your hand, too, if you're not punching right.
Yeah.
Even professional boxers break their hand for these reasons.
It's not a good target at all.
No, it's not. There are people that teach you to give the forehead when they're jabbing. Like, you lean in.
In Cali,
Yes, and you put your forehead into the jab, which is, I don't think is a good idea. I'd rather move out of the way. Because it's still impact, right? It can be good on the brain.
Yeah.
But it does damage, especially if you're not, placing your hands correctly. This is why I think we were talking about this a while ago, like about people that they're taught to like punch the bag with no gloves.
Yes.
I think that's great training from MMA because it teaches hand placement. Big gloves did not teach that because you can punch almost like anyway with big gloves and not hurt yourself.
Yeah, I know. When I did my Bodog fight in Costa Rica, people asked me, how come you weren't grappling more? And it's because my trainer at the time wrapped my hands like a kickboxer.
So tight.
I had like a cast on my hand. So great for hitting though, because I couldn't feel anything on my hand. I could swing hammers, which is what I was
And
doing.
those are days there's no commission. You could put tape on your hand. You could tape your hand.
Well, no, they had a commission there, so it was per spec. But you wouldn't normally wrap an MMA guy like that because he won't grab. Because it was just so thick, But it was by regulations because they do inspect it. But I remember I was just overhand rights from ground and pound all day, and no pain whatsoever. It was just solid. But you can't really grab that way. But that's the difference. Like when you train with a glove, it's kind of similar. Like a big glove, especially if you got hand wraps underneath it and the glove,
you feel invincible.
like most people do. Yeah, you can just swing and your hand might be a little bit loose. It doesn't matter. I think the one thing I always have to caution people is when you do go make that transition to go bare knuckle, when you hit pads or gloves, punch a lot softer.
Because you got to build up.
You got to build up.
And you get used to really placing your hands.
If you just swing as hard as you can, you're going to roll your hand. Because you're going to realize, oh, crap, it's one thing to have a closed fist. It's another thing to have a really tight fist.
It's completely different. Completely different. And you can have a lot of power on your shoulder if your hand at the end of the spear, like your hand isn't prepared for the impact. That power you have works against you. Your hands have to be ready to be at the end of that sort of power that your body's going to put into it.
And the other thing is it's tiring.
Yeah.
Which is why you're supposed to have open hands and close
on impact.
And people would be like, oh, why don't you just always have it closed? You're going to hit like this. Because if you were doing it right, you would be tired.
Yeah. You're exhausted, And
then when you actually hit, your hand's not going to be tight enough.
Yes.
So
I think it was I want to say it's Damian Mai, but it could be some other grappler. Don't quote me on it, but I think it was Damian. He wouldn't tape his hands at all. He would ask commission not to put tape his hands. He just went to gloves.
I know people that do that,
Yeah, because they just wanted, they know that they're not going to win by knockout. Or maybe, but it's unlikely that Damian's going to win a fight by knockout. He's far more likely to catch a rear naked choke and rather has as much freedom for his hands as possible. I thought it's a great idea. Yeah. As long as you're not throwing a lot of overhand rights. Yeah, that's the only thing you wouldn't want to throw with, no wrap on your hands at all. Because you land one on top of the head.
Which is likely,
That's one where you're throwing over the top. There's a good chance you're going to land that overhand on top of your opponent's head. Yeah, man, but I think it's smart, to have, because at the pump too, your hands get swollen. Sure. Just think, in a grappling match, how swollen your hands are. Now you add tape and gloves to that. Imagine what your hands feel under. I mean, you probably felt that because if your hands were taped so tight. I've always, from day one, I'm always aware of this. I always asked them to wrap my hands very lightly. Yeah. Put as less tape there as possible.
And I had one fighter who was actually a really good knockout puncher, one-punch KO, but he only wanted wrapping just around the knuckles, nothing on the wrist, nothing. He wanted this to be mobile, but just some padding on the front.
For punching, I don't see why.
He
just preferred it.
But this guy could lay people out.
For grappling, having the freedom of the wrist makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. There's a part of me that kind of misses the day with no gloves. Because I think people were more careful about. I think in some ways it favored grappling. I was talking about this with someone. I can't remember who it was. It's no gloves are better for grapplers. And then I'm thinking to myself, that actually makes a lot of sense. Because there'd be less punching. The striker would be more worried about throwing, because of his hands. So he's more careful about his hands.
For sure.
Less risk for us. And how much easier is it to choke someone when you have no gloves on?
Oh, tremendous.
Oh, my! People don't realize how. And I always have my MMA guys practice with gloves because it's a whole different ball. You never see this rear naked choke with gloves. Very rarely.
It's much more difficult.
You see this guy, and there's a reason for that. This guy is not as strong. For those of you who are listening, I'm doing the Gable grip rear naked choke. It's weaker, but easier to get with gloves than the traditional rear naked choke with one arm behind the head, which is very difficult to get with gloves.
Yeah, I mean, especially hand fighting is so much harder because it's already a problem.
Yeah, you grab the glove.
With just barehanded, if you have someone who's good rear naked choke defense, you got the gloves. Now you have to get that thicker thing under the chin. Yeah. And not to mention you have the guy easier grip thing to grab, pull down. So it definitely makes it a lot harder. It's more of an art form to be able to use the gloves and still be effective at attacking the neck.
Yeah.
But I think there's an element that I do appreciate what I would think would be more realistic as far as fighting bare knuckle because it kind of adds another factor to worry about, right? Yeah. Because when you're wearing wraps and gloves, you rarely have to worry about hand integrity.
Yeah.
I can always swing hard and I know I'm okay. But if you didn't have that, now I have to pick shots more carefully. Like you said, especially when you're in the guard because the angles are kind of funny sometimes.
And you don't want to hit that hard all the time.
Yeah,
exactly. It's more about placement.
Yeah, exactly. Because the placement becomes a lot more important. I know, like at my fight, I was just swinging, you know, like, and like I wasn't even looking. It was like boom. Because it didn't matter. I could hit the floor. It wasn't going to hurt me. But if I was bare knuckle, I couldn't throw that many shots. And the other thing people might not realize when you're ground and pound, because you're at this angle, because you're diagonally punching somebody, it's not a normal angle to hit somebody. Especially with straight punches and whatnot, it kind of changes how you want to land. That's why I favor overhands a lot, because if you're trying to catch the chin, punching like this is not the ideal angle to rock the chin. But if I can overhand it, now I can glance it.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
When you could turn the chin out sideways, that's when you really...
Yeah, that's when you really clip someone. Yeah. Because I think it takes more damage. It makes sense. Like I think you probably absorb damage better if it's straightforward.
I don't know if you're doing that, but it's much more rare to see someone get
knocked
punch
out.
KO'd straight, you know.
That's true.
You know, normally it's the side shot,
sideways,
temple shot, you know, behind the ears always gets people down. Yeah. That's a little different though. That's more like...
But it wouldn't be a straight punch. It'd still be a hook.
Angled.
Yeah.
And I think it has a lot to do with not seeing it as clearly, right? Because even when the punch hits you, but it's coming from the front, you're seeing it somewhat, and your body's taking some compensating behavior, right? But when it gets you from the side, chances are you didn't see it, and you totally catches you blindsided.
Yeah. Well, that's what like people that get knocked out. They say, I've been dropped, not been knocked out cold, but I've been dropped twice in practice. Like, never been knocked out in a fight, but like in practice, like not out cold, but out, right? Like, would have been a ref stoppage for sure. And both times, I don't remember what happened. I have to be told what happened. Because I probably had my eyes closed, or I'm looking away, or like, you know, like something. Because I'm not saying that I have like the strongest chin in the world, but I've been hit in the face by Vanderlei Silva a bunch.
Yeah, it's no fun.
I mean, he didn't, because like, you know, if you see a punch coming at you, there's something about your brain, I think, prepares you for impact.
Sure.
And like you do something that you just react to it. The thing is, when you're looking away, it's like you're in the dark. Like if you blink, or if you got your eyes off target, or whatever the case, you're not preparing, you're not bracing for that impact. I think that's a big part of knockouts, because most people get knocked out, they'll tell you, I didn't see it coming. What happened? What happened is like one of the most common questions. The UFC guys are standing back up. They're still on the ground. They go like, what happened? Has no idea. If it was a kick, a knee, a left hook, clueless, right? And you've seen some guys take beatings in there. And like, man, that should have not the guy. I truly think it has to do with attention. This is why I think like eye placement is so important, just like kind of maintaining that focus. It's something that you have to practice too, because you see guys shadow boxing looking down. I used to do it. It's like awkward looking forward the whole time. Like it's easier to just look at the ground, but it becomes a habit after a while. You know, like little things like that. I think the accumulation of like these little things in practice, you don't realize how much they impact your performance. Because I always say this to my students: the biggest lie a fighter ever told himself or herself is, "I'll be different when I fight." Oh, I train this way, coach, but don't worry. When it comes, you know, a fight day, I'll be different. It's the biggest lie. And everyone tells themselves those lies because you think you're going to be different. No, you're not. You're going to be exactly who you train, how you train every day, right?
My brother used to have that pet peeve about shadowboxing.
Yeah.
Because shadowboxing, you can see people developing horrible habits.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, are you going to punch people with your hands open, John Jones? Or are they not? It's closed, right? And likewise, they just punch to punch. And like you said, like they're not even looking forward; they're looking down.
Yeah,
it's like
they're trying to look cool more than they're actually trying to look. Yeah.
Like my brother he does this whole shadowboxing workout. But the idea is, you should have an imaginary target in front of you.
Yeah.
And I'm fighting this imaginary guy, and when I slip, it's not because I'm just slipping because this is part of the routine. I'm visualizing a jab coming at me. Okay, slip outside. I'm going to return, uppercut, left hook, boom, elbow, right?
Yeah.
Or left hook, I'm bobbing and weaving. It's not just like I'm going through the motions, because essentially then you're just doing garbage, right? You're just pumping out stuff without having a stimulus. So it takes more work because you have to actually imagine and keep a target in front of you, imaginary target. Like, okay, this guy is throwing a 1-2. So a lot of times my brother, he'll do shadowboxing workouts, but the two people facing each other, and then they're working off each other because you're punching, and then I see you're throwing a jab. Okay, then I'm slipping that jab, and I'm going through. So it's shadow boxing, but with a partner. But it makes it better because now at least I have it's easier to imagine because the guy's actually in front of me versus having to create and maintain this like imaginary target. But to the point, you train you fight how you train, and if you're training like just open hands, looking down, or just throwing punches for no reason, no target, it's going to affect you.
It's not really. It's like you're practicing. You might as well be playing different sport. Like it's like you're preparing yourself for something that's not realistic. And this is why, like, kind of transitioning to similar, going off that right there, is like how a lot of people drill. And I've never drilled. I used to flow roll a lot and do specific positions. Like I'm going to start at half guard. Oh, I hate half guard. Doesn't matter. You're going to do a half guard. That's how we call it drilling. You pick a position and you have to force yourself to play in that position. But I never drill the way people drill today. And I'm watching a lot of what these guys are doing. And like to me, it's just like the way wrestlers drill to me makes sense. Like with half resistance. Like it's very realistic. It's almost like combat. To me, that's very intelligent because like you're preparing. Because if I go zero resistance, learning to move, to full resistance, practice, right, live action, there's a gap there that most people cannot bridge after 20 minutes of practice. Move, because no matter how well you assimilate that move in memory terms, your body's not used to those reactions. So practicing at half speed, I think, is a very good bridge between learning to move with no resistance and applying the move full force. Right? So like this is why to me drilling with resistance is the only thing that makes sense. When I see a lot of these kids, and it's like the classic one is like place the hand on the knees and shuffle your feet around. And I'm going, you know what I'm talking about? There's one guy laid down, and then the other one places it, and then he just like shuffles his feet like in a half moon.
Conditioning.
And I'm going, like the 23, almost 24 years of jiu-jitsu, Dave, I have never seen anyone pass anyone's guard like that. Like, it's like, it would be like jogging. Like, there's some footwork going on. There's some cardio, it's conditioning, whatever. But you're not making your jiu-jitsu better by jogging. You're not improving your jiu-jitsu by shuffling your feet like that. There has to be some element of live resistance. And I see it all the time. And I see these guys spending a lot of time doing this stuff. And it's always I was like, oh, so-and-so told me to drill. It's like always someone else telling them to drill. And I know a lot of these guys, and all these guys don't drill like that. Yeah. But they talk about it because it helps them, promote their brand. People listen because people want a recipe. Everyone wants to be successful. No one wants to learn how to be successful on their own because it's too hard. They want a recipe. This is why everyone's always looking up to someone who's done it and go, tell me what I need to do to be like you, right? And that works so well. But the problem is, somewhere along the lines, the people who are on top, who are in the position to give these lessons, they're no longer being honest. They're just giving you bullshit because it's going to sell. And there's plenty of bullshit out there. Because if you were honest, the number one advice you would give a guy who wanted to be a champion would be, how about you spend less time worried about all those little things you're worried about and just like show up to the gym every day. And like little things like that, no one wants to hear that. Yeah. But let's be frank, that's 99% of the equation. Is just show up. Stop overthinking, show up and go to war every day. Try to win. When people have that, it's like, okay, show up to the gym every day and make sure you win every round. Try to win every single round. Don't lose a single fight. Like battle every. That's it, right? And then of course there's methodology for diet. For I'm not against drilling per se, but I'm against wasting your time. Things aren't going to help you in a fight. There's so much of that going on, and I'm watching. It's like, man, you're just frying your nervous system, and there's zero benefit to your jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, the whole thing with drilling, especially now that my joints are not as cooperative. Right, is that you want to use drilling as a substitute for live combat because it's safer.
Yeah.
And as you said, you can bridge a skill gap that you might not be able to in a live opponent.
Yeah.
So I learned the technique the first time around. You can't do it with any resistance. Yeah. That's what I call the practice phase. When you're like, you're just going to let me do it to you.
Yes.
That's not drilling, right? It's
learn to move. Yeah.
I'm trying to get the concept of how this move works. And I need to do it with like essentially a dummy, right? And then drilling, you incorporate some resistance to it and you're executing full speed, full power. And the idea here is like you're saying, one, I'm building proficiency in a technique with minimal resistance in an ideal situation. there's very low chance of injury because we both know exactly what's going to happen, right? You're going to do this, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
The injuries happen when something unexpected occurs.
Yes, it's not controlled. Yeah.
Right? That's live combat, right? So live combat is generally where everybody gets hurt.
Yeah.
It's very rare if someone's drilling like arm bars and go, ah!
Yeah.
I've never had that happen in my life.
Takedowns, yes, maybe.
Takedowns
but like
can happen.
even so, it's rare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, even with takedowns, what happens is someone threw somebody bad, right?
Yeah.
Someone fell the wrong way, right? So something unexpected happened. You didn't fall the way you were supposed to fall. Or the guy didn't take you down the way you were supposed to. But if you're drilling properly, everything's being done properly, no problems. And then, of course, live combat, you have full resistance, you have unknowns. But if you can hit it in live combat, obviously that's a great metric. Like, okay, I can do this. I understand this technique well. But like you said, the problem with live combat, it's a lot tougher on the body. It's a lot of unknowns. You can get hurt easy, and you also, it's harder to do all the time for those reasons. So you can't spend 2 hours sparring every day. If you are, you're not really sparring that hard then, right?
No, 100%.
Right? Yeah. But I can spend 2 hours drilling every day.
Yes.
And get a lot of benefit out of it.
Yes, I agree.
So some people could say, well, the sparring is more beneficial, perhaps. But then again, you can only spend like maybe 20, 30 minutes hard sparring.
Yeah.
And then you might not be able to spar tomorrow.
Yeah.
Just because of fatigue. But I could drill for at least an hour every day, no problem, and be able to come back. So it's just more about time invested. I could spend a lot more time doing it. And then, as you had mentioned, because there's less resistance, there's better likelihood that you'll be able to do the technique properly.
Yeah.
So that's the benefit of drilling. So like in my school of thought, you're going to come from the wrestling background and all that. We invest a lot of time in drilling because we can.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we do our sparring as well. And like I always tell people, for me, sparring is a feedback loop. Because whatever happened in sparring that went wrong, I have to plug that back in.
To your drilling.
Like first to my practice, right? Because I got to figure out what I misunderstood about the concept of technique. And then once I correct that, then the drilling reinforces the new model of what this is. Yeah. And then we try it again, Yeah. So I think they're all important. But for me, the bulk of my time is spent when I was training would be for drilling. Yeah. And then sparring is just the feedback loop.
Yeah.
But
do you think that wrestlers? I never wrestled in high school or college. My wrestling comes from MMA and grappling or whatever. You think that one reason why they drill so much, and I always thought this of judo and wrestling, is because there's so much more impact in judo and wrestling than there is in grappling on the ground, like jiu-jitsu, ground, niwaza. That they can have, like, if you're only exclusively practicing on the ground, there's so much, because there's less impact. You can have a 70-30 ratio, so 70% live rolling, 30% drilling, for example, even more. You can even have, you wouldn't be able to go as long. I agree with you. If you're going live, you're probably cutting your practice at an hour, just over an hour maybe, and you're exhausted by then. You might have to take the next day off.
Yeah.
Whereas in wrestling, I feel like it's even more exhausting.
An hour of live wrestling.
Exactly. It's even more exhausting because you can't break when you're standing. Someone's shooting, you're sprawling, you're back up. It's harder than on the ground physically, and B, like there's so much more impact. The risk of injury, I mean, it's 3-4-fold. Like most injuries I've witnessed in my life come from transitions between standing and ground.
Yep.
Like it's the transition. Like you see injuries from sweeps and passes. Submissions are the thing that hurt people the least. Everyone's panicking about like heel hooks and I'm like, that's not the one that hurts people the most. Like not even close. It's transitions on your, like it's stand up. This is why Jigoro Kano wants to make something safer and he removes all these submissions. I got so much shit for this when I said this. I said this in an interview in Brazil, and like I had the judo community entirely on my side, and then they kind of flipped the other way because of what I just. But I basically go, I don't think Jigoro Kano really had a deep understanding of grappling, because you would have not had. I mean, it's not just him, but like the judo, because like why would you eliminate what is? I mean, the takedowns are far more dangerous. Like if you're talking about health and you're talking about physical integrity, you would eliminate takedowns. I'm not suggesting we do that. But that's what you would do if you really were safeguarding health, right? If that were your main concern.
The major injuries I've seen in the gym were mainly takedown related. I've had 2 guys, again, scissor sweep, broken shin bones. And I remember I had a kid break his arm posting on the mat. I've seen that a lot in wrestling too, where they're slamming. And again, because wrestling.
Oh, those are the worst.
Yeah, because in wrestling, they don't want you to break fall because that would be a takedown. So you're trying to post out.
Oh, that's right.
So like, a lot of times you do that posts.
You can't control what's coming behind it.
Yeah, and boom, you see kids snap his arms.
Stingers. I have a herniated disc on my neck because of these stingers. I mean, there's so much like in ribs, knees. Like there's so much that can go wrong in
wrestling for sure.
That's why I actually think this is why I'm going back to my question.
Yeah.
Could that be why they have a ratio of maybe 30-70, 30 live, 70 drilling? I don't know what I mean, maybe even less, maybe 20-80. Whereas in jiu-jitsu it's the opposite.
Yeah. From my rough memory of my childhood, teenage years, when I was wrestling, because I only wrestled in high school, we would have 3-hour practices, and there was maybe 30 minutes of live. The rest was drilling.
Yeah.
Or there was practice, of course, learning new techniques.
So that's
conditioning,
80-20 ratio, more or less, something like that.
And it was like 30 minutes of live. You remember wrestling matches, and at least in high school level, are 6 minutes long. Yeah. You train for 3 hours for 6 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's a brutal 6 minutes because the other thing is the pace is very different, right?
It's go, go, go. There's no break.
Jiu-jitsu guys would have no idea the pacing because wrestling in jiu-jitsu world is very slow paced. Right? We're like,
yeah, you take your time.
And there's a lot of distance, and then people move in, and then they back and move in, and everybody's very scared to shoot because I'm going to get guillotined or going to get kimura dropped or something that happens. So you have to be a lot more cautious about shooting. Whereas in wrestling, you're starting from touching range, and you stay in touching range the whole time. If you back out, that's stalling. So just even taking a step back,
you have to be engaged the whole time.
You're engaged the whole time. Essentially, you're almost forehead to forehead the whole match. And it's not like I can just sit here for like 30 seconds. That's stalling also. So it's go, 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 go. It's a 6-minute sprint with weights on, right?
Yeah.
So it's brutal. Now, if you're going to do 30 minutes of that, it's also brutal, So, yeah, it would be like in jiu-jitsu, the closest thing when you do like scramble drills. Like we used to do that. We have people start sitting on their back to each other.
You got 20 seconds to get
scramble,
out.
go, boom.
Great practice, yeah. I've done it before.
And those suck, but that for 6 minutes, right? Someone will get hurt eventually, right? So I think that is very true at what you're saying. Part of the reason why the trainings are structured the way they are. Now, to be fair, in my experience, I've never had a major injury from takedowns. All my injuries came from submissions.
You getting caught in submissions?
Yes. So
because I don't have that same. I wonder, is it because you're not tapping fast, or are you going cranking you?
Both.
Man, really? I can't remember the last time I've been injured by someone.
I've had, my elbows never been a factor really.
Yeah.
Knees, but first time it really hurt my knee, I was actually doing a knee slicer on somebody.
Yeah.
It was Masvidal. I tapped him like 3 times in a row with a knee slicer, and then on the 4th time or 3rd time I was going to catch him, he freaked out and started rolling, and I just heard, and I thought he shredded his knee. I'm like, oh, George, you messed your knee up. He's like, that wasn't my knee. I was like, oh, crap. Yeah, so that's the first time I heard it. I hurt my knee a second time later on doing the same thing. Yeah. And then I said, you know what? No more knee slicers. Forget it. There's too much of a liability. You have to really, the thing is, like, if you're trying to be nice to somebody, you'll hurt yourself. Like, I find with a knee slicer, I gotta shred you first. Because if you start freaking out, and I'm loose, my knee's in a bad spot. And then the other times we're off heel hooks and knee bars that either we're overcranked, like the Palhera situation, when they stopped it and they cranked it anyways, or me and my brother just being stubborn, eating ankle locks.
I can see that, especially with brother.
Yeah, I know my brother's elbows, like him, for whatever reason, he would get caught in arm bars more, and he'll just let it, you just take it, like he's like, in his mind, he would never tap to an arm bar,
That's, see.
But it's funny, for me, there was a limit that I would tap to a joint lock. To a choke, I'll sleep. You know, I wouldn't really care. You know, if I can get out of it, I'll get out of it.
You got a lot of trust on the referee and everyone else, your opponent.
I die. You know, like for me, that's the mindset I had. But I never got into something. Like that's a misconception people have. Oh, you're just stupid. You're gonna tap out of pride. You're not gonna tap out of pride. It wasn't that. I always felt I had a chance out. Like I remember the one time I got put to sleep in competition. It was Tarsus. We were in double overtime, and he had a rear naked choke on me full in.
I remember that.
And I was just thinking, how I'm gonna win. And I was just trying to fight hands.
He's got no hooks. It's kind of overboard, isn't it? Like something like that, or no?
Well, he initially had no hooks, so I was fighting it. But then he got the hooks in, so that's when I was thinking, how I'm gonna win because I need to get 4 points.
Yeah.
And then next thing I knew, I was looking at the ceiling. You know. Yeah. So it wasn't like, oh, I hate this guy. I'm not gonna give him the satisfaction of a tap. I'm just gonna sleep. Like no, it never was that. You know. Yeah. And same thing with the joint locks. Like I never like when they restarted me with Paul Harris, it wasn't like, oh, I'm not going to tap you because I don't like you. It's like, how am I going to win this? Losing is never an option for me as a competitor.
Yeah.
It's never something I'm going to say, okay, I lost. Like I've never lost with grace.
Yeah.
Like some people are like, oh, you know, like instead of going berserk, you should just like resign.
No, yeah, I can't understand that.
Like, that doesn't happen to me.
That means you lost like minutes ago, days ago. You mean you walked in there already not believing it.
Yeah, like I know I went one with, I mean, it's happened to me a few times, like when I fought Monson or what's his name, David Terrell. There's like, I'm down by 2 points, 30 seconds left. I'm throwing flying triangles and, you know, doing all sorts of crazy stuff. I remember with Monson, I hurt my neck throwing a flying triangle that just slid right off of him. But it's like, I'm not going to lose with grace. Because losing is not something I accept. You know, I'm doing everything I can. To me, like, and if I lose a match because of points, is because I ran out of time. You know, you give me more time, I'll wear you out.
And you say grace, people like, you know, that mean you don't mean disrespectful towards your opponent.
Yeah.
But and this is, you know, something I've always been aware of. Like, you, it's fine to be angry when you lose, and you shouldn't have grace, but it should always be internalized. Like, what am I doing different? What am I doing wrong? I'm the ones that I keep fighting. Never like, I think that's what people, you say, like, when you say losing without grace, I think a lot of people might misunderstand you and mean that you're supposed to be an asshole to your opponent afterwards.
Oh, right. No,
no, I know you don't mean that, but like, because when you say grace, people think, oh, it's okay. Some days you win, some days you lose. Like, you shouldn't be thinking like that. You should be pissed off that you just lost. But it's never projected. It's always internalized. Big difference.
Is that even like angry? You know, I guess it depends on what happened in the match. But like I've grappled Jeff like twice, lost on both times. First time was kind of BS. I had a crap call. Second one, he legitimately got me. But I was never mad at him because first of all, even when you get gypped of calls, the competitor didn't do it to you.
Yeah.
I get mad at the referees.
Yeah.
When they give a shit call, I'm like, this guy messed me up, man.
Yeah.
You know, and one crap call kind of changes the whole dynamic of a match. You know, because if you lost 2 points,
oh yeah, like
now your whole strategy has changed. Because what would have happened if
one reset will do it?
Yeah, like if I didn't have those 2 points back, you know, then I would have strategized everything very differently. But when you're 2 points back now, everything changes. But even then, like the only time I felt like upset at a competitor was probably with Paul Harris because it was against the rules.
Yeah.
Right. But other than that, I've lost to people and like, man, fair game.
Yeah, but I think that you have to be like that towards your opponent. But at the same time, and I say this, I tell my students this, like even in the gym, someone passes your guard, and you're not chewing on that on your way home, you're missing out on an opportunity to learn. Yeah. I think that's a good thing that if you walk off the mats, not patting yourself on the back over the blue belts and the purple belts you tapped, but rather thinking about the brown belt who passed your guard and why, you're going to make a lot more progress. Like this is the kind of stuff that people are talking about, like what's, you know, how to get good at jiu-jitsu, what's the secret, right? This is the stuff that to me is like everything.
Yeah.
Like using every single loss as an opportunity to actually improve. Like take notes if you have to. This is how many times I got tapped today, and then just spend the next day thinking about how you're going to solve that problem so you come back the next day with a new mindset. I think very few people do these things.
My brother and I were filming our matches back in the 90s.
Yeah, smart.
I always have, right? So I never had to like get angry at unnecessarily, because when I lost, like, all right, let's look at the tape. What happened? Like, I got into doing half guard because I lost. I actually, my first pro grappling super fight was against Gordo. Rafael Carrera, inventor of the modern, or credited
half guard, of
the modern half guard, right? And at that time, this was probably like maybe 2000. Like, nobody was really, at least in my training, half guard was just an intermediate position.
Yeah.
Like, nobody actually wanted to
halfway
be in half guard.
Yeah.
You just like, you got stuck there and then you get out of it. You shrimp your way out. So when I grappled him, he ended up beating me. He swept me twice. I think I took him down or passed his guard or something like that. And he beat me with a last minute half guard sweep. And then I filmed everything and I just studied the video like 30 times. And I learned, okay, he does his little body lock half guard sweep. He does this thing. Yeah. And I started doing it in my training. Yeah. Like you were saying, like I call it situational drills, right? Where I just put myself in that position
and figure it out. Yeah.
And I was just playing half guard the whole time. And then I ended up getting a decent half guard. I came up with some of my own sweeps, and it became an asset to me. But there's no reason you can't do that in training either. Like now, like I was talking before, like I'm filming myself shooting with a bow and arrow.
Yeah.
And then I'll watch and see, okay, what did I do with the release? How was my posture? Where was my shoulder in proper alignment? And you have to document these things.
Huge, yeah.
Because I forget who says this, but what isn't measured isn't improved, right? So one way of measuring yourself is filming yourself. Yeah. And especially nowadays, everybody has a phone. So everybody has a camera. Put it on the side, boop, film.
Yeah. It's so much easier. Like, you're right. Like, late 90s, early 2000s, you had to have like VHS. It was a lot more work to record. That's why I have like whatever it is. I think I have one VHS tape of me as a blue belt somewhere, and then whatever's on YouTube, which is not a lot. Like I have close to none of my matches. Every now and then someone will, like it's happened like 2-3 times in the last couple of years. Like an old opponent when I was a purple belt or brown belt, like, hey, this is me grappling Robert Drysdale in 2002 or 3. And then they posted on their Instagram like, oh shit, it's me. It's a brown belt. Like I had never seen myself grapple as a brown belt or as a purple belt until people. And then that's you keep that as something valuable. But I recommend people record all their matches. I think that's a great habit. Not only for historical purposes too, not just for your own self development. I think that things should be recorded. If you have the ability and technology to do it, why not?
Yeah.
Like think how much more we would know about the history of everything if we had better records of
absolutely,
like history. I mean, when you're talking about like newspapers and articles and oral testimony and all these things, it's very thin. It's very thin. For you to build a case with that is extremely difficult. I wonder how history is going to be written 50 years, 100 years from now, when the technology, the AI is going to be so sophisticated. It's probably going to, it might be writing history for you, which is kind of scary too. But I think that these things are, like, you have to record these things. If you have the ability to do it. When I was a kid, you used to tell, like, oh, you should have a diary. Like that's what people, like, you should have a diary and record your day. And I thought that was stupid. I look at that completely different. It's like, oh man, I wish I had a diary. And if I'd written in like 5, because I think it's actually self-reflection too. I think just writing about your day and what you're doing and what you're thinking about. But I think it's just recording things is there's something very special about in terms of identity. And I think a lot of people miss that. They think history is about memorizing old dates and things that aren't relevant to their present and future, when they're extremely relevant.
Yeah, and especially with video, because you capture a lot more, right? Like a written testimonial is
a lot of opinion.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty much all opinion, right? That you're putting out.
You're not supposed to. Like good journalism and good history writing it's supposed to be devoid of opinion.
Yeah,
it's almost impossible.
Yeah, it's very biased, right? And you're only listening to the things that this guy deems important, But when you have video, you see everything. And the only thing you're missing out on are smell and, I guess, the sixth sense that this, the aura of the room.
100%. Yeah, you can't.
You walk into a fight locker room and you smell tension.
Yes, it's hard to explain, but I know you're talking about. You're gonna get that in video. That's the only thing that's missing, though. You're right. Yeah. Everything else is in, which is incredible because, I think technology might solve that one too. I think AI and virtual reality might be able to create these environments in the future.
That'll be interesting. They could, as far as, because it's a real thing, right? That the energy of the room, the aura of a person.
Oh, it's everything. It's the best thing about it.
Yeah, and some people might not appreciate that as much because you haven't been in real stressful situations. Yeah. But like fight rooms are highly stressful, right? Because there's so many people that are amped up. I think you can walk in there with your eyes closed and know something's up.
Oh yeah. I believe you. Like it's something in the air.
I would love to do an experiment of that actually. Like
a blind person
bring
walk
someone in. Like, hey, I'm just going to show you to this random place that had their ears covered, eyes covered. Bring them in, and then ask them, how are you feeling right now?
Yeah.
Because there is, at least when you have all your senses engaged, your heart rate goes up. Like everything's pumping.
Yeah, and for example, like the silence says a lot too. So if you see a room and it's like, full of like guys or alphas and they're all very quiet. It's terrifying things. You know what I'm talking about? It's like, these are killers. They're all very quiet. It's almost like you want them to be talking because you get a picture of what's going through their head when they're talking.
Right.
When they're silent, you're like, what is this guy thinking? So it creates tension, right? It's like,
yeah, there's a lot of tension in the fight room. And not to mention what ends up happening to the coaches and corners, especially me.
Yeah. Oh, I always do. I feel like an idiot. Like I'm shadow boxing. Look at that idiot coach shadow box. You can't help it.
Yeah. It's
like next time I'm shadow boxing in the locker room with my fight. I think it just happens.
It's all the time. Yeah. Like to the point when I'm watching fights on TV and I'm interested in them, not just like passively watching them.
Yeah.
I'm shadow boxing also. Yeah. It's almost like I have like a sympathy with the fighter or empathy rather, that I'm feeling what they're feeling, and if I was feeling that means I want to get moving, right? Yeah. I have that nervous energy,
Yeah.
When you're not invested in watching the fight or it's whatever, like
you be on your phone, you can be.
Yeah, you don't care. But
no, I'm with you. I remember fights that mean something to me, like a friend or something I'm really emotionally involved in. I catch myself like slipping punches for them.
Yeah,
like I'm playing video
my girlfriend's
games,
always telling me, stop shadow boxing.
I'm like bobbing and weaving, like I'm moving my feet. Like it's almost like you're trying to, because you're so involved in what's happening, like you're sending like good energy or something. Anyway, Dave, I gotta get going, man. I got a long day ahead of me. I gotta make up for I got like 200 emails in my inbox, so that's gonna be my Sunday. But man, it's a pleasure as always. This has been fun. Hope you guys enjoyed. And I guess we'll shoot another one next week.
Yes, sir. Actually, but it might be in a little bit.
No. Yeah. You gotta go somewhere?
Yeah. I'm gonna be. Well, I have my camp here.
Oh, that's right. You got a camp coming up.
Yeah, coming up on Tuesday. So, and then after that, I'm going hunting. So it's right after the camp. So hopefully the next time you see me, I'll have a freezer full of elk.
Oh, hook me up.
Yeah.
No, we'll do that. And when you're back, then we'll get another one in. And in the meantime, train hard, guys. Show up. Stay awesome. Love you guys. See you guys next time. Ciao.